It used to be that calling a film a turkey was an insult. Nowadays, there's actually an audience for some of the worst movies ever made.
Baby, you are gonna go broke showing turkeys like these.
Now we're talking turkey.
Gobble, gobble, motherfucker.
It's turkey time. Gobble, gobble.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Let's Talk Turkeys. I'm Movie Miss, and today we're going to be talking the 1998 film Godzilla.
November, Gotham. The target's heading right at us. He's too fast. Panamanian government evidence of passengers dead or alive. Please stand by. I'm slowing down. Godzilla's up! Thing's only 200 miles off the eastern American seaboard. We don't even know what the hell it is.
My co-host, Nikki Flicks, is off this week, so I am being joined by a Godzilla super fan. Everyone, please welcome David to the podcast. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. Are you excited to talk some giant creature today?
Definitely. I can talk Godzilla all day long.
So this is perfect for you then.
Yes, definitely.
So the reason we're talking Godzilla is because A, we love Godzilla, but B, it is a turkey. It has a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of only 15% and an audience score of 28. Does that surprise you? I thought there was a lot more audience love for this, to be honest.
No, because it's I mean, when it came out, it seemed like it was mildly popular, and then it just dropped and the fandom hated it. I guess I could see kind of maybe a little bit higher because in some groups and stuff, there are people that like really love it, but that's probably like the 20-something%. So.
So do you remember when you first saw this movie? Did you see it at the theater, and what were your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I saw it in the theater. I was excited. I remember the promotion coming out, Taco Bell with the little chihuahua with the Yokiro Taco Bell. And, you know, they had all the cool cups and stuff. And then, like, the design came out, and then you were kind of like, all right, maybe this will work. And when I came out of the theater, I remember mildly, like, I kind of liked it. I did. And then in time, I think the Godzilla hardcore fans got to me and kind of started to turn me a little bit. And then, like, a few years later, I was like, all right, no, I can appreciate this for what it is. So now it's like, yeah, I do enjoy it for what it is. It's a cool, great summer blockbuster popcorn flick.
So that was my thought as well. I remember seeing the promos for it and getting super excited because we hadn't had a big American Godzilla film. And I went to the theater to see it. I was a little let down by the design of Godzilla. I felt he looked like a dinosaur, which I didn't care for. What were your thoughts on his design? Was that what you expected, or did you want more of like a lizard?
I wanted more of the traditional Godzilla. Like over the years, I've discovered a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And they did say that Emmerich and Roland Emmerich, and I cannot think of the other guy's name off the top of my head right now, but neither of those guys were huge Godzilla fans. And there was a lot of inspiration from Jurassic Park, which you can see in the movie easily. You're like, yes, yeah, there's definitely Jurassic Park here. So, but also the original designer, Patrick Tatopoulos, I believe is how you pronounce it. If you look at his sketches, the monster looks so creepy. And if they would have kept that like creepiness, this movie would have been insane.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I looked up Patrick Tatopoulos, which they also named the main character in the film with the same last name as a nod to him. I thought that was fun.
I did too.
But so the creature, I felt like he was very dinosaur-like, and that's the one thing I didn't like about the movie. Even though I don't like CG movies that much, I was going to buy it. I was going to be along for the ride. I was like, Godzilla, anything, give it to me. And I loved it because, like you said, directed by Roland Emmerich, co-written with Dean Devlin. And Roland Emmerich is known for Independence Day, Stargate, these big summer blockbuster movies. So I felt like, again, on a rewatch, The reason I love this movie is not because it's a quote unquote monster movie, but because it's an action movie. It's a blockbuster. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and it's when you approach it like that, and I believe they even said that's kind of how they wanted to do it. They didn't really want to make. I mean, Emmerich himself said, "I didn't want to make the original Godzilla. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to make my own," and it felt like that. Like they were doing their own take on everything. Which,
Yeah.
if you look at Godzilla movies, like every series, essentially they do a reboot. They redesign them, they recreate them, come up with a different origin at times. So it's kind of like you look back on it now, like, all right, it's not that bad.
Right. So they pumped out the script in 5.5 weeks, and I feel like you can tell.
Definitely.
But again, I'm not going to fault it for that. It's summer blockbuster-ish type of film, so that's fine. So the budget for this movie was quoted to be anywhere between 130 to 150 million, and they spent 80 million on marketing, which we were pounded in the face with, like by Taco Bell and others. But it only did a box office of 379 million. So it profited, but that wasn't as big a number as I was expecting either. I figured worldwide it would have hit at least 5, but not so much.
Yeah, and looking back on it, I found out that, yeah, it didn't do so well worldwide in Japan and everything. And I thought when it first came out, they said it did. So I must have misinterpreted something. I would have expected a sequel out of it.
Oh, for sure. It was set up to be a trilogy, which never happened. Creature design, as you mentioned, they didn't go with the final drawings of Totopoulos, but Stan Winston and his studio did design the Godzilla that we see in the film. And he did some puppetry work, which is visible later in the film, which I really appreciate because I love me a practical effect. And then it looks like this movie was originally given to Jan de Bont, and his budget for the film was too much, so the studio didn't approve it, which is why it got handed over to Roland Emmerich, which I'm not mad about it. Like I said, it's a fun action film. So top cast build for Godzilla is Matthew Broderick, Jean Reno, he's a French actor, Maria Pitillo, and Hank Azaria. And then we can get into the other players as we go. The IMDb plot. Are you ready for this? This is how they describe this on IMDb.
Oh, Lord. Okay. I'm buckled in.
It says, French nuclear testing irradiates an iguana to turn into a giant monster that heads off to New York City. The American military must chase this monster across the city to stop it before it reproduces. Spoiler much? Like, why even watch the movie, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that just summed up the entire thing right there. And I love how it's French nuclear testing, and it's like the first thing that comes out of that is because that's exactly what you think of as the reason for the monster's existence, and the total badasses are the French.
Blame it all on the French. I knew it. All right, so let's dive into our plot. So the movie opens with a beautiful orchestral piece of music, which I loved. And we get an off-color, old school kind of 8mm type of footage with French Polynesia highlighted. And then we get the title card. More footage rolls and we get credits as we watch iguanas, I'm guessing, and lizards swimming and moving around the island. We get shots of a bomb test happening, I'm guessing a nuclear bomb offshore. We see some fallout and radiation, and we zoom in on some lizard eggs. Now, after telling you the opening here, I'm curious, Godzilla's origin story, the Japanese creation of Godzilla in the origin story, were they trying to mimic that at least with this bit, or was this a reinvention of how he was born as well?
To me, it felt like a little mixture of both, because Godzilla's kind of gone through a couple of reboots throughout the years. In the original, it felt like it was the nuclear testing stuff woke him up. And then they kind of hinted that, well, maybe he was an irradiated dinosaur. And then later on, they kind of like went back, and I believe how they pronounce it is the Heisei series, which was when it came back in the late 80s. And they did the actual, they showed the dinosaur transforming. So I kind of feel like that came out a little bit before this. They might have got some inspiration from that. They just did iguanas instead of dinosaurs, because iguanas are much cooler apparently.
I would have went with like a Komodo dragon or something. That would have been really cool.
Oh yeah, see, that would have been great. I mean, because the irradiation could explain the spikes and the tongue, and oh wow, that would have been great.
Okay, so we cut to a Japanese fishing boat in the South Pacific at night during a storm. They get a hit on radar of something headed their way very big, and they sound the alarm. And I got to tell you, as soon as that happened, I was so excited. I was like, ooh, we're going to get a good monster moment here.
And I don't know if they mentioned it here, if it was later in the movie, but I don't know if you caught it. There is a Star Trek reference there.
No.
Yes, the name of the ship is the Kobayashi Maru. And that's from Star Trek. That was like the training sequence that you would go through as a captain. I mean, don't quote me on this. I'm sure Star Trek fans are gonna beat me up later.
That sounds so familiar. That sounds right.
That was such a cool little sneak peek in there.
I love that when they give nods to other things. So then we see a quick shot of Godzilla's, what we assume is Godzilla's claw, tearing a hole in the side of the ship, and it begins to take on water. Godzilla's tail slams into the window of the bridge, and we get a quick cut to a man driving in a storm singing to himself. So they go right from the ship being attacked to cut to the next scene, which I didn't like. Personally, I don't like when a movie does that. I wanted more Godzilla attacking the ship.
I would too, but I kind of understood the pacing of, okay, we're going to give you a little bit of taste, and then we're going to cut to our quote unquote hero. Because, obviously, at that time you thought Matthew Broderick, hey, there's the hero.
Yeah, I wasn't mad about that casting.
As an action hero, no, but he enlightens the movie with just amazing humor. So
yes, and he has that eternal boyish charm. Like and I feel like he and Michael J. Fox both have that.
Oh yeah, and they never age. It seems like they just don't grow old.
So we cut to Matthew Broderick. He is Dr. Nick Tatopoulos. He's passing through a chain link fence labeled Chernobyl. He gets out some equipment, and you see a photo real quick of a woman there. And he begins collecting worms for his research when he gets interrupted by a helicopter landing nearby. A man from the State Department identifies himself and tells the man that he is being reassigned. I wouldn't mind. Get me the hell out of this rainy, yucky Chernobyl.
I love how the rain, because I believe the rain was even on the ship and everything. It kind of sets up for 2 hours of just rain. I think that's why subconsciously I will watch this movie on a rainy day.
You're looking out the window for Godzilla.
And I thought, to me, I don't know, maybe other Godzilla fans, I haven't talked to many people about it, but I felt the earthworms was kind of their half-assed way of kind of referencing Mothra. Of here's a little thing of Mothra. And even though earthworms, Mothra doesn't really work.
So then we cut to Tahiti, where we meet a French man asking the hospital staff about the lone survivor from that Japanese boating incident. He goes into the man's room with his crew, and one man asks in Japanese what happened. And the man says he saw Gojira, which I had to Google, because even though he says it fast and it kind of sounds like Godzilla, the actual meaning of the word Gojira is supposedly a combination of two Japanese words meaning gorilla and whale. So yes. I wasn't mad at that.
I love that they reference that because, so many Godzilla fans want the original name, Gojira. So just say it and everything. So
was that the name in the Japanese movies? It wasn't Godzilla, how we translated it to English to do that, right?
Yeah, no, it was Gojira because it was, like I said, the translation, and it was named after a guy who worked on the set that I believe, if I remember my history correctly, had the nickname Gojira because he was a big dude. And so they essentially named the monster after him. How
fun. I love that. I like when you see in the credits too, like movies, how the guy's name is Stan the Man Jones as the best boy grip. They give people nicknames and quotes. So, this guy's nickname was Gojira.
I love that.
So later in Panama, Dr. Nick lands and he's immediately whisked away by Colonel Hicks. And as they walk, Nick explains that he works for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and he doesn't appreciate being taken away from his 3-year study of earthworms. Okay, taken to Panama. He's learning radioactivity mutates the animals. And I'm like, exposition dump? Are we explaining Godzilla by using the earthworms?
Apparently so.
So Colonel Hicks shows Nick a giant footprint and tells him that that's why he's here to study this sample. Nick doesn't realize, though, that he's standing in this deep hole of a footprint. And I like that we get that really awesome overhead shot to show us just how big Godzilla is.
That was a cool reveal, especially because I like how Broderick plays it so stupid of what's just going on? Where's the thing? And then suddenly you see in his face oh shit. I'm in it.
Light bulb. Like you said, he realizes what's going on and he asks Colonel Hicks, there's no animal that big, so what is this? He gets interrupted by Dr. Elise Chapman, played by a fantastic comedic actress, Vicki Lewis. I know her from that TV show News Radio. So I was happy to see her pop up. So she's sassy Dr. Elise here. She's a paleontologist who is also his boss for this assignment. And their assistant comes running up and shows them how they have this, I don't know, a tape of footage of the sinking ship.
I never thought of that before until you just pointed out. I'm like, yeah, how the hell did you get that?
Right? And then the eyewitness saying Gojira, which I guess maybe somebody videotaped that, but the ship, I call bullshit. So then we cut to New York City, where an aspiring reporter, Audrey, who's played by Maria Pitillo, is working. And she tells her boss that she's tired of being his assistant. She wants to be a reporter. And he just, I think that's Harry Shearer, if I'm correct, shamelessly hits on her. Just a slime ball. And she turns him down. But I was like, you go, girl.
I just got to point this out, of every time I watch this movie, I love the throwback of like the 90s fashion, makeup, hair, clothes, all. It just takes me back to like the good old days. It's like, wow, I remember how cool this was.
Right? She was living the 90s fantasy, Audrey's look.
Definitely.
So cut to Colonel Hicks, Dr. Elise, Dr. Nick, and a large crew now in Jamaica, driving their Jeeps, and Dr. Elise shamelessly hits on Nick. That seems to be a pattern here in this movie. He mentions that he hasn't had a girlfriend for quite some time. They pull up to the beached Japanese ship. Obviously, they're there to study the damage, and you can see that the claw rip on the ship. And I like the shots. They purposely have somebody on top of the ship and somebody on the ground, so you just get an idea of the scale.
Yeah,
you know,
it makes it feel like how you said of practical effects. This doesn't feel CGI. This feels like this is actually there. They're interacting with it, and that's just a good feel.
So the Frenchman introduces himself as Mr. Rocher, and he shows up with a team of his own people saying that he's from an insurance company. And I was like, I'm on to you.
It's a pretty shitty cover. I mean,
yeah.
On top of the fact of I think they even joke about really insurance company gets here that quick.
Right.
That never happens.
And then we also see Dr. Nick take some samples off of the torn areas of the ship. We cut to some fishing boats now at night off the coast of New York. One of the boat's nets appears to be caught on something, and it took me a minute to realize that all three of these trawlers, their net is attached to each of their boat. It's one giant net, I guess, that's connecting all the boats. I'm not a big fishing expert.
I'm not either. I guess that kind of makes sense. I would assume why what happens.
Yeah, they all of them, the men are yelling about what to do when the boats suddenly start to get pulled in reverse by the net, and all the boats are getting drugged down. So that's when I assumed, I guess they're all hooked up. I don't know. But I love the shot. It reminded me so much of Jaws.
I was just going to say that because that's another movie we have in common. And I thought that's, especially with the whole, with Jaws, it's the 3 barrels. With Godzilla, it's the 3 boats.
Oh, I see what you did there.
At one point, I think I was even saying, one of my watchings, I was like, you can't go down with 3 ships. Not with 3 ships, you can't.
So then on a plane, we see Colonel Hicks getting a report that the 3 boats had an incident there. Dr. Nick and Dr. Elsie start to hypothesize on what kind of animal they think this is. And after some critical thinking, Dr. Nick says it must be a new species, the first of its kind, and not some long lost dinosaur. So then here we get the confirmation. We're not going with the whole dinosaur back to life situation.
Because we got to go more realistic, because an irradiated iguana is more realistic than a dinosaur coming back to life.
Much more. So then we fade to Manhattan, where Audrey, her best friend Lucy, and Lucy's husband Animal, the cameraman, played by Hank Azaria, whom I love in everything.
I just gotta say, before we go any further, I love the fact that there are so many people from The Simpsons in this movie.
Well, I know he was for sure.
And then Harry Shearer does Montgomery Burns.
Okay.
And then I did not know until recently, Harry Shearer's assistant secretary in the movie is Nancy Cartwright.
Oh my gosh, I know that name. Okay.
Yep.
Look at you picking it out. All right. So Audrey sees a news report on the TV, footage of Nick, and she tells Lucy that Nick was her college sweetheart, but she hasn't seen him in many years. And then that explains why Nick had a photo of her in Chernobyl, because they were sweethearts. So down at the docks on a pier, I love this scene so much. We get this sweet little old man pitching his little folding chair, and he drops his line in the water and he gets a bite. But his excitement is short-lived because he has to run away from the oncoming tsunami because here comes Godzilla. I'm guessing that's his head. You tell me. It looks like there's kind of two ears or spikes, like.
That's kind of how I took it, as that was his head. He was swimming forward, and
Okay.
like the wave is kind of spreading. And I love how this, like, you know, feeble 93-year-old man is able to outrun Godzilla.
I know. He waits till the last possible second to start running. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So then Godzilla emerges from the water after totally demolishing that dock, and he starts walking past a bridge and then into Manhattan, dropping boats off of his body as he's walking. Got so much disaster movie like Day After Tomorrow vibes from that. I was like, yes, Roland Emmerich, give it to me.
It's one of my favorite scenes of the movie. Just him emerging is just such a great setup for like all the disaster that's going to happen.
Yes, and he's like taking bites of trucks and like he's just destroying everything. I don't know. I guess they look tasty to him. I don't know. Eel in a can.
I always kind of question, is like, is he able to smell the tuna fish in there or something, or is it like, what's going on? Why the trucks?
Yeah. So then next we get introduced to Mayor Ebert giving 2 thumbs up to a crowd.
that was
my God.
That was such, I never got it as a kid because I didn't watch them, but like later on I come back and I realize like that is such a great little like shot at them. It's like it just
100%.
And I don't remember if they even liked the movie or not.
So, I didn't look that up. Shame on me.
I didn't either. I should have.
But Michael Lerner, who was playing Mayor Ebert, and he tends to play Ebert in any movies and TV where they need an Ebert lookalike. And I like that his assistant here, I didn't write his name down, again, shame on me, but his assistant is Gene, obviously supposed to be Siskel. Yeah, it was so fun. This movie just had so many fun things in it.
It was just such a dumb, like, what is going on here? And you can't help but laugh and enjoy it.
Like you said, it's a popcorn flick, 100%.
Exactly.
So he's giving a speech to a crowd outside when the ground starts to shake, car alarms are going off, buildings crumbling, and it's complete chaos. And here comes Godzilla crashing through all these tall buildings. All I could think when I was watching this was, it really is what they say later in the movie. It really is like an urban jungle. Like if you get that shot of Godzilla passing through all these buildings, it does look like a big animal moving through like a forest.
They did a really good job because later Godzilla movies, like the MonsterVerse stuff that they've been doing, he's so big and he's just demolishing buildings and it's like whatever. This was kind of cool. It had that almost claustrophobic feel of seeing him weave in and out, that you're like you said, it's like a concrete jungle. They did such a good vibe with that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So we get lots of shots of people inside buildings watching Godzilla pass by. And I laughed so much when you see Audrey's slimeball boss on the phone talking about how there's just no stories. And Godzilla goes right behind him past the window. But there's no stories.
That's so great.
Turn around, you asshole. So in the diner, Audrey is telling the story of how she broke it off with Nick after almost 4 years of dating because he suddenly proposed to her. And all of a sudden, things start shaking. Godzilla goes by outside. And of course, Animal, got to get the shot, runs outside, grabs his camera from the news van and follows Godzilla and starts filming. And I like that Godzilla steps down and he just stands there and he's screaming as the foot goes down. And we don't know what happened to him because you just see the foot go down. And then when the foot comes up, you see that he was right between the toes.
Hank Azaria was so good in this movie, and he played such a great, like, stereotypical New Yorker. It just,
Right?
I mean, I always kind of wonder, like, do regular New Yorkers watch this movie and just like hate him for that stereotype of like, this isn't how we talk?
Now, see, me never having been to New York, I would assume that he is what New Yorkers are like.
See, me too. I based everything I know off of New York off of Godzilla. So anyone who listens
We
to
all should.
Yeah, like anyone who's listening to your podcast in New York, I immediately apologize for that. Blame Godzilla and a young, impressionable mind.
So now we cut to Colonel Hicks, Dr. Nick, and the Military Mobile Command Station, and they're set up in New Jersey. Sergeant O'Neill gets introduced, and that is Doug Savant, who I was happy he had a little bit more than a small part in this, because I remember him, and this is a chick thing, from Melrose Place, the original Melrose Place. I love him in this. He's so fun, and I think he reacts appropriately to every situation he's put in.
He's another great, I mean, there's so many wonderful characters in this movie that you cannot hate this movie. It's just so great. I didn't even know he was in anything else. I just knew him from this.
Yeah. So he shows up, O'Neill, and he tells Colonel Hicks they've lost track of Godzilla, which, how? And then we see them watching a news report by Audrey's boss showing camera footage that Animal shot earlier. Back at the station, after Audrey is condescended to by her boss, after telling him she knows a man on the inside and can get a story, she swipes his press pass as he's leaving. And I was again, you go, girl, get it.
She's set up for like such a powerful, like she could have been such a great, strong female character.
Yeah. So as the military attempts to evacuate Manhattan, good luck there, we see the mayor's helicopter landing, and he's bugged with a mic by Roche, the insurance guy. Sure. And he goes in, and his team, and they're listening in on the mayor getting debriefed by Colonel Hicks. Sergeant O'Neill busts in and tells them they still cannot find Godzilla, but we might have a lead. I don't know how you lose Godzilla.
Apparently one of his new powers.
I mean, your keys, yes.
Giant radioactive ninja lizard.
That's the spinoff.
I can almost picture him now, like some point in the movie going, Godzilla, vanish.
So we cut to Colonel Hicks, Dr. Nick, and the crew going into a subway tunnel that has been demolished. So clearly that's where Godzilla dug his way down and burrowed under the city. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's another reason why it works for me, I think, in this film, that Godzilla is just big enough to be bigger than the buildings, but he's not ridiculously huge. It's plausible that he'd be able to burrow under the city because he's not so big, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's something that actually a lot of Godzilla fans, few of them do argue on this. Of they kind of feel that in the later years he's gotten too big. We kind of missed some of the old stuff where it was like, all right, he's big, but you know, he's not so big that you're just like, all right, I give up. Just step on me and get over with.
Yeah. So Dr. Nick proposes that Godzilla is just an animal, and we just need to figure out what he needs, and we can lure him out of hiding. So fucking smart.
Leave it to Matthew Broderick.
Right? Ferris Bueller's going to figure this shit out, you see. A giant military operation is happening, and Nick takes pictures with his little disposable camera.
I have that in my notes. Remember the days when disposable cameras were a thing? I mean, that was just, it like literally took me back to how awesome were those days.
Yes. For all you kids listening, before the iPhones, yes, we used actual little cameras, and the disposable ones were even better because then you could just drop them off in their entirety at the photomat to get developed.
Exactly. And then you paid like $10 and you got 3 pictures out of 20.
Hey, that's on the person who took the picture. That's not their fault, developing it. So the Frenchmen are surveilling this operation from their hotel room, and we see a dozen dump trucks dropping a giant mountain of fish in the middle of the city. So smart. And then after a few minutes, Godzilla comes busted out from underground. He smells those fish. So there you go. He's got that sense of smell. We get a moment where I love this. Nick is standing there with his little camera, and Godzilla just comes right down in his face, and he snaps a photo of him. I love that so much.
The two things, I mean, going back just a little bit, "That's a lot of fish" line is one of my favorite lines of the entire movie. It's just, he delivers it so well, and it feels like at that point it's a crossover between Ferris Bueller and Godzilla. It's just so great. The interaction between Godzilla and Matthew Broderick is like, it took me back to like the original Godzilla, where you had the Dr. Serizawa or Dr. Yamane, of that like relationship between Godzilla and the person. And I like that you kind of like establishing of like, no, Broderick understands Godzilla. You know, he's more than just a giant monster. And then of course he's, you know, turned out to be a giant monster.
But he nailed as far as like, he's an animal and he has needs. Let's feed him. Nailed it. So Godzilla goes for those fish. And I like that O'Neill here jokes, we're going to need bigger guns. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I didn't even realize that, but yeah, another Jaws reference.
There it is. Tick it off on the little Jaws counter. So they open fire at Godzilla and then make chase when he takes off running, which I would too. I'm trying to enjoy my dinner and everybody starts opening fire on me. Like, what the hell?
Exactly. And I love how, like, right before they're going to do the open fire thing, like Godzilla and Broderick are face to face and that little finger wag of don't do it, not yet. Please don't shoot me and the monster together.
So a helicopter fires missiles at him as he's running away, and they miss, of course, they miss Godzilla, and they destroy the Chrysler building. Good job, military. I think they're causing more damage than Godzilla is at this point.
Yeah, like Godzilla's trying to be careful of like, no, I don't want to destroy that building. You know, this is important. And gets pissed off at the military. Like, what are you doing?
So more military copters show up and chase Godzilla, and they're shooting up a storm. And just when they think they've got him, he sneaks up behind them and attacks, taking out all three of the copters. I was like, yes, bitch, yes.
He was so like stealthy and smart. He just came off like, you know, this, like he had the military mind and the military were just the idiots.
Yeah, and he was pissed. He was like, I was just trying to eat and mind my business. So the mayor makes a good point here. He says that the military is doing more damage than Godzilla. Oh, he's reading my mind. So then next we see Nick going into a little drugstore to buy several different types of pregnancy tests. When I first saw this for the first time, I knew immediately what he was doing. I was like, oh shit, Godzilla's gonna have babies.
I didn't catch it. And in fact, there was a joke that Audrey makes that it's like until like a couple of years ago, I didn't understand when she makes a joke about the harem. And I feel so stupid because it took a few years ago, a friend of mine who writes fan fictions explained to me what a harem was. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know.
That's amazing. So then Audrey enters, and they discuss that it's been 8 years. He asks her what she's been up to and assumes that she's a reporter by now. She doesn't say no. She doesn't say that's wrong. She just kind of goes, mm-hmm. And he still talks to her, though, which I thought was interesting. It's like, it's been a long time. She dissed you, but you're going to go ahead and just welcome her with open arms and take her right to your tent with all your confidential materials. Very trusting, especially if you think she's a reporter now, right?
Yeah, see, I mean, if it was just a girlfriend, be like, all right, whatever. But yeah, the reporter part's like, I wouldn't trust that, you know. Might have a Geraldo moment here.
Well, yeah. So he takes her to that tent for some tea and basically spills the tea on Godzilla, tells her all about him. And I'm like, shut up. What are you doing? So he runs a pregnancy test and realizes Godzilla is pregnant. He says Godzilla is the first of his kind, and so it obviously reproduces asexually. And we learn that lizards can lay up to a dozen eggs at one time.
I went back to, again, to Jurassic Park with the velociraptors, they were all supposed to be female, and then they're laying eggs. So it's like, well, again, another nod to Jurassic Park.
We're going to have a little ticker for that, too, because there's another one later.
You do like a drinking game of all the references.
Shit, you'd only make it for like 20 minutes.
Exactly.
So Nick runs off, leaving Audrey alone in the tent, where she is able to swipe the videotape labeled First Sighting Top Secret.
Yeah, because the military labels all of their stuff top secret.
So she runs off and makes a story out of it for the news station. Nick tells the military men in the briefing room that Godzilla's about to lay eggs, or possibly already has, and they have got to find that nest before the eggs hatch. So the military men see a news report with Nick and the footage playing, and they get mad. It's obviously what Audrey leaked, and they fire Nick. And he tells them he didn't leak the tape. It was stolen, but they don't care. They fire him anyway.
A callback to the news report. I love how in there, that's where they do the whole Harry Shearer screwing up the name and calling it Godzilla. And then in the bar, she's like, no, you idiot, it's Gojira, it's Gojira. It's like, that's like for so many years, that was us Godzilla fans of like, you know, the hardcore fans were like, no, it's Gojira.
But then it's almost acceptable because you would expect that dickhead to get it wrong.
Yes. Yeah, and that's they have the perfect character to do that with.
So outside, Audrey approaches Nick getting into a cab and gives him excuses for why she stole his tape. Bitch, please. There are no excuses. And she finally apologizes. In my opinion, Nick has the correct response and just says, well, good luck. And he leaves. He's not having it.
I loved that too, because it was that thing of like, no, you do so many romantic movies. It's the guy always apologizes and the girl screws up, and it's like, no, about time. The guy's like, no, fuck you, bitch, I'm out.
And I was totally on Team Nick at this point.
I was too. I was always Team Nick.
I was Team Audrey's hair.
Oh God, yeah.
So Animal sees Nick leaving and he hops in a van to follow the cab. The cab misses the airport exit and Nick gets suspicious and starts yelling at the cabbie to stop. He sees his driver is the insurance guy who introduces himself as Agent Rocher of the French Secret Service. And you're like, well, we kind of knew that, right?
Yeah, I haven't really had a chance to bring it up yet, but I loved him in this movie. It starts out as a joke of you're laughing and like, really, the French, come on. And then like as the movie progresses, you're like, dude, these French guys are awesome. Like they've even got some of the great jokes of like, like, oh, croissant, no, they have donuts. And it's like they do so well in this movie.
The coffee jokes, yeah.
The coffee jokes are just awesome.
I feel like he's secretly the MVP of this movie, Rocher.
He kind of was. It's like, I would like to see a spinoff just of his character.
So he tells Nick that he knows the military is not going to look for that nest, and he believes him, and he thinks they should work together to find it. So he takes Nick into a large warehouse with a shit ton of weapons, so much. And he tells Nick that they're here in the U.S. to clean up the mess made by France doing the nuclear testing. So there you go. He admits it. It was the French.
It was all their fault. And I like the little shot of like how easy it is to get guns in America. It's like I knew it was easy, but I didn't know it was that easy.
Right. So then outside, we see Animal climb up on the wall and he's looking in and sees them forming their plan. He heads back to the city and tells Audrey he's going to follow Nick and the French guys tonight and she should come along too so that she can make it up to Nick by breaking the story.
Her like crying over Nick and all that stuff, I think that was the point where I started to get kind of annoyed with her. Earlier on when she steals the ID and everything, it's like, okay, she's got the potential to be a great, strong female character. And she so quickly reverts to just being this stereotypical, just
of course.
At the point you're just like, oh, just shut up, bitch, just shut up.
So I like here that they all get decked out, the French and Nick in the military gear, so they look like American military because they're going to sneak in, and they're all chewing gum. It was so funny. They're like, we gotta look like those slack-jaw Americans.
And they're so enthusiastic about it too, like chewing and bobbing their head. It's like, what?
I have this horrible thing where I don't like to listen to people chew. So I was going nuts during the scene because they're like smacking the gum. But it's so effective. So they drive up to the military blockade and they ask why they're there. And Nick jumps in before anybody else can talk. And he says, I wasn't talking to you. And he says, well, Sergeant O'Neill called for us, so you need to let us in. And the soldier shines the light on Rocher, who's just chomping on that gum. And he's all, do you have a problem with talking? And I like how he's all, well, no, sir. And he's like speaking in like a Southern accent, kind of like he's from the South, US.
Oh, this is one of my favorite scenes. This is just so great.
And the soldier tells him to get moving. And I like, again, Rocher says, well, thank you very much. Like, kind of like Elvis.
Later, he mentions the Elvis movie. And he's like, it's such a great Elvis impersonation.
So then we cut to Animal and Audrey in the subway tunnel where they're following Nick and everybody. And the ground starts to shake. And suddenly Godzilla bursts into the tunnel. He exits the tunnels and goes up onto the street, where he comes to a military blockade near the park. And he looks over and sees this giant pile of fish. All the lights are shining on it. It's all quiet, and you can see like the military personnel and vehicles kind of positioned around. And Godzilla has the wherewithal to figure out this is a trap and is like, nope, peace out, and just leaves.
That is so great. They did a good job of that. Of like, you're not going to fool me again. Like, no, yeah. You can't get me again.
But they realize he's leaving, and they open fire on him again. So Godzilla runs to the edge of the city and leaps into the river where the Navy has submarines tracking him on sonar. They fire missiles at Godzilla and they somehow lock onto him, or I don't know how, but he leads them back into one of the submarines, like in a circle, and it hits the submarine and that explodes. They can't really do heat seeking on him, I would think. So,
I don't know if torpedoes have heat seeking or not, actually. I don't know how
I don't
that
know.
works.
I'm no torpedo expert, but
Yeah, neither am I.
how do you lock on to, I guess, I don't know. So another sub fires missiles at Godzilla, who's now heading for land, and he's trying to get away and burrow into the ground under the water there, but the missiles hit him. The mayor and Colonel Hicks start celebrating, and then we cut to this really sad shot of Godzilla with this. He's just like slowly sinking and falling, and you can hear a sound reminiscent of Duel or Jaws.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that. I didn't catch that.
That sound, you know that as a Jaws fan, what sound I'm talking
yeah.
about. Yeah, and it's so sad. I mean, Godzilla didn't ask for this life. The life chose him.
I like how it goes from also like this really cool above ground like monster chase scene to him jumping into the water and then like automatically turns to Hunt for Red Godzilla.
So back underground, Nick and company come to a large collapsed portion of Madison Square Gardens. Bet you New Yorkers didn't like that too much. So they climb up through all the fish and debris and garbage, and they come across the nest with more than 12. There are dozens and dozens of eggs up in this bitch.
Did you get the same vibe that I got with the eggs if it felt like an alien movie? It was just like so creepy.
Totally. So the men start putting explosives on some of the eggs, and they quickly realize they do not have enough for all these eggs. And then the eggs suddenly begin hatching, and everybody gets chased by baby Zillas. Oh, I love me some baby Zilla. This is where the puppetry work comes in.
They were so great. I mean, they were a total ripoff again of, the raptors from Jurassic Park, but it was such a great addition to the movie. They were like cute, funny, and scary all at the same time.
And Roche and Nick now make it out, but some of the other men aren't so lucky. The baby Zillas get them. Meanwhile, Animal and Audrey wind up trapped in a shower room. Then we cut to Dr. Elsie telling the mayor and Colonel Hicks they need to find this nest. So Hicks says, fine, get a search party. Took you long enough. So then Roche tells Nick to go get help, and he and his men will stay there and keep the baby Zillas contained. So then we get more of Roche's men getting eaten. Nick gets trapped in the elevators and narrowly escapes. And I love that we get practical effects and puppets in this scene again. I love me some practical effects.
It helps bring it a little bit more realism to it.
To me, it made it more tense. Like I was like, ooh, shut the doors.
And then, I mean, going back just a little bit, the two things that stood out to me were, one, and it works with any B movie, is you're sitting here like screaming at the TV, like, really fucking thin metal doors are going to stop these monsters from busting down.
Yeah.
And then when Audrey and Animal are in the Knicks thing, I just recently thought about it, I was like, you're in the shower. Couldn't you shower off the tuna smell?
Oh my God, I didn't even think of that.
Like, right there, shower it off, and then boom, you don't have to worry about baby Zillas anymore.
Again, lending to the fact that they are led by their noses, these creatures. So then Nick finds Roche, and then Animal and Audrey fall out of an air vent. And all four of them run away from a gang of baby Zillas. They make their way to the broadcast booth where Audrey and Animal are able to do a live broadcast telling everyone they need to destroy the building. That way, the baby Zillas, there's at least 200 of them, they can't get out because I guess they can reproduce early, like right away as well. That was shocking to me.
Yeah, that would be like, all right, so they just have babies and babies hatch and they have more babies.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit.
All right.
So Colonel Hicks gives the order to blow up Madison Square Garden. So the four of them have to scramble and get out before it happens. And I did laugh at this part when they're running around trying to figure out how to get out and they run by a Blockbuster.
I loved the running in Madison Square Garden because I just kept laughing of like how Nick couldn't keep up with the group, yet he was somehow able to outrun the baby Zillas.
Right? Our hero. Yeah, we can't let him get eaten. But it is a pretty tense chase sequence, I thought. I thought they amped up the tension there. They managed to escape, though. And it's in 100% unbelievable way, if you ask me, in this movie that has been totally believable till now.
This is the moment that kills it.
But I was like, whatever, we'll just roll with it. So they get out of the building and a jet fires on the gardens, blowing it to bits. Nick and Audrey share a moment and kiss, but I really didn't need romance in this movie, so I was like, meh, whatever. And the moment is short-lived because immediately Godzilla emerges from the rubble. Didn't die after all. And I actually audibly cheered.
Really?
I was like, yay, Godzilla's not dead.
I don't remember if I did or not. I think I kind of expected it because it was like, well, this seemed a little too short. There's got to be a little bit more to the movie here.
I know, the movie is like freaking 139 minutes long. 8 of those minutes are credits, but it's over 2 hours long. Yeah, so you're like, wait a minute, there's still movie left here.
Yeah, and I personally didn't mind the kiss scene just because it led to the possible kiss between Animal and our French hero. I'm sitting here thinking, like, are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? No, they didn't do it.
So Godzilla, like I said, emerges from that rubble and makes chase after our heroes, and then realizes all of his babies are dead. And again, even though these babies could destroy mankind as we know it, I was still sad for Godzilla.
There was some emotional scenes in this movie that actually kind of get to you. And like, that was one of those scenes of like when he's nudging the baby and you're just like, oh shit.
You're like, I cannot believe in the
like,
CGI.
Where's my tissues at?
Right.
Well, especially because like rewatching this again now, the special effects are like on the same level as the shit you see on Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah, they're not the best.
No, they did not hold up well at all. But like that scene, you forget all of that and you're just like, oh.
So they hotwire a cab and Godzilla chases them, complete with them jumping off of Godzilla's foot and just missing a head-on collision with some military vehicles. This is some crazy chase scene.
That cab, I mean, watching the cab was stronger than the fucking military's vehicles.
I know. I was like, how is it still running?
Exactly. It's like that made the Batmobile look like shit.
So Sergeant O'Neill calls Hicks and says, hey, guess what? Godzilla's still alive. O'Neill finds the cab frequency, radios to Nick, and Nick tells O'Neill they're going to lure Godzilla to the Brooklyn Bridge. Again, Ferris, so smart, saving the day with his ideas.
That scene with the cat, that was one of those few scenes in the movie where I was like, damn, that's brilliant. With the throw in the thing and then like getting the free, that was so smart. And then of course they kind of ruined it with like how quickly he was able to get to the cab, like find the frequency of everything. It was like, wait a second.
Yeah, I know. In this completely believable movie, they ruined it.
They had me until that point. And it was just, no, I'm done.
I'm checked out. So once on the bridge, Godzilla gets the cab into his mouth. Oh, I didn't like this part though. Along with a piece of bridge that has electrical wires on it. I'm guessing that's what the cables are on the bridge. I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with how that works. I guess, it would make sense because there's got to be lights on the bridge. So there's probably some kind of thing there.
Yeah, electricity. Because Nick grabs one of the wires with his bare hands, I call bullshit, and zaps Godzilla in the mouth, which causes him to release the cab, which goes flying through the air and landing on the bridge and is able magically to drive away. Holy shit.
It was like every scene up until the movie was like, no, this can't get any more possible. And then that scene comes up and it's like, hold my beer.
Right? We can't get more ridiculous. Oh, yes, we can. So Godzilla hops up onto that bridge, making chase. Nick's plan works, and Godzilla gets caught in those cables on that bridge like a giant net. The military fires some missiles at him. They have to hit him multiple times, but he finally collapses and slowly dies. And again, you get the close-up of the eye, the pupil slowly, going away, the fading heartbeat. It's just ludicrous to me how unbelievably sad I am when CGI monsters die. The babies died, Godzilla died.
Godzilla's death scene took me back to, and I mean, I didn't think about the time because it wasn't out at the time, but later on, it took me back to another movie that everyone absolutely friggin' hates, Peter Jackson's King Kong. I always tell people, the reason I like that movie is because there's no surprise. King Kong's going to die at the end, but you care. You're so emotionally invested in the character that you get sad. That was Godzilla. Like, he's going to die, and you're just like, this is so sad. And like Nick and him having that moment is just so powerful.
I, watching it again, forgot how sad that was, and I just felt gutted. I was like, oh my God.
So good.
So Audrey and Nick walk through the crowd now, and her boss confronts her, and she quits. And Nick promises his story exclusively to her now. Animal gets upset when he opens his camera and realizes his tape of everything that has happened is gone. Nick's cell phone rings and Roche tells him he has the tape. Sneaky bastard. And he thanks Nick for all his help. And he says, after they've cut a few things out, Animal can have his tape back. So then we fade out of the crowd and into burning Madison Square Gardens. And the camera zooms in on one lone egg still standing. And it hatches and Baby Zilla pops out. Cut to black. The end. Roll credits.
I loved like when they were doing they're showing them all on the news, and then they cut back to Animal's house, and his wife is cheering, and she's like, "That's my husband. I'm gonna kill him." I died laughing. I was like, she was so great.
I love their relationship, the little bits we see of it, how they both give each other shit, but they don't care. They love each other. So funny. All right. So is there anything that you feel like we missed or a scene we didn't touch on?
The only thing I want to bring up, and it's just because you know me and you know I've become a huge Scooby-Doo fan. There is a tie between this movie and Scooby-Doo.
No.
The voice of Scooby-Doo, Frank Welker, does the voice of Godzilla, does the roar.
Really?
I learned that when I was going through Wikipedia, and I was like, oh shit.
I love that. Now, when you say voice of Scooby-Doo, what do you mean?
Frank Welker does the actual voice of the Ruh-Roh and the like actual voices of Scooby.
Like now, or like
Yeah,
in the movies or cartoons, or like what are you talking?
As far as I know, he has been Scooby, I believe, since the beginning, because he was also Fred in the original cartoon as well.
Wow.
So he's been Fred and Scooby since like the 60s and shit.
That's so funny to think that they had to have a person do Godzilla, because why not just do like Jurassic Park roars, like CG roars, you know?
Yeah, well, especially like Godzilla's roar is, I believe it's on the cello.
Oh.
I believe that's how they originally got it, was it's a chord they do on the cello.
Oh, that's so cool. I should have done my due diligence on that, but I didn't. But I love the Scooby-Doo tie.
That blew me away. So it's like you got ties to The Simpsons and Scooby-Doo.
You were in heaven. You're like, yes. All right. So at the end of each show, I like to do 3 questions. Are you game?
I'm game.
All right. So question 1. We get the tease of the baby Zilla hatching at the end. And obviously at the top of the show, we discussed this was meant to be a trilogy, but because it flopped, they never did it. So it's teasing the sequel that we never got. So my question to you is, what does a sequel to this film look like? Let's say somebody knocked on your door and said, David, here's the money, write us the sequel. Off of this movie, not the ones that have happened since.
Unfortunately, my mind is now corrupted by the fact that I watched the YouTube video that talks about the sequel. So I know what the sequel was going to be.
Well, then let's hear that if you don't mind, because I did not watch that.
So as we said, it was planned as a trilogy. And the sequel was, there was a treatment done, and it was going to involve the baby Godzilla, and he was going to fight a giant insect. And it was going to happen in Sydney. And apparently they must have taken inspiration, because there is a spin-off series called Godzilla series. They did essentially an episode like that, where he's fighting a giant insect that's trying to take over the world. It was insane.
That sounds crazy. So Baby Zilla hatches in New York, manages to make it to Australia, and fights a giant insect. It tracks, because everything in Australia is trying to kill you.
Oh, yeah. And it's probably already giant in Australia, because you see all the shit in Australia, and it's huge.
That totally tracks. So you'd be okay with that? Would you have watched that if that was the sequel? Would that be?
I would have. I would have in a heartbeat. I mean, it's a common thing with fans of that don't like the movie that say the animated series was the best thing to come out of it. And I agree. I highly recommend anyone listening to this that has never watched the animated series, find it. You could probably find it for $10 on Amazon. It is totally worth it. They expand the characters better. Godzilla is awesome. So yeah, check it out.
All right. Question 2. Do you think Nick and Audrey stayed together and possibly got married? My answer is, I like to think they did, and maybe they took baby Zilla with them and raised him a la Chris Pratt with Blue in Jurassic World, like trained him to do commands and shit.
Oh,
and they're just a happy little family, right? Living in Queens.
That would be awesome. And then have baby Zilla doesn't actually grow any bigger, always stays small.
But yeah, did you even care about their relationship? I feel like they probably stayed together, but I couldn't really care less.
I did. I started out with I wanted him to hook up with Vicki Lewis because I like Vicki Lewis and I got a thing for redheads. So I was like, I'm down for that. And then Audrey slowly won me over. I was like, all right, you whiny bitch, I got you. You got my heart.
Now put on this red wig.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of think they probably would have stayed together.
Okay, and question 3. Do you think Mayor Ebert got reelected after all of this? He was very worried about it, you know.
I'm going to give that one a firm 2 thumbs down. I could see maybe Gene ran and maybe he won.
You wouldn't vote for good old Ebert?
No. I don't see that happening. He's like the mayor from Jaws. Like, no, I don't see that re-election happening.
But he was the mayor in Jaws too. He got reelected.
Yeah, but there was some backstage stuff going on there, you know, like there was some money changing hands, like out of the book and shit. There was like mafia connections.
All right. Well, if any of you have had your interest piqued and would like to watch Godzilla 98, or if you're down for a rewatch, at the time of this recording, it is currently available for pay streaming on Amazon Prime or free if you subscribe to Stars on your local cable provider. I want to thank you, David, for joining me today to discuss Godzilla. I hope it was fun for you.
Oh, it was awesome. I loved it. First podcast.
Yay, we popped your podcast cherry.
I wasn't going to say that, but I'll let you say it.
Oh, fuck it. You can say whatever you want. All right, everyone. We want to thank you for listening as well, and we appreciate all your support. And on that note, goodbye. Hey, listeners, Movie Miss here. Listen, I know you have a lot of options when it comes to podcasts, so thank you for listening to the show. I know everybody says this, but for a fledgling little show like ours that's just hanging on, you know, we just finished season 4, we're rolling into season 5. It would really help us if you could subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Good Pods. We're also on Pandora, Audible, Amazon Music. It would really help us grow the show and reach more people if you could subscribe and then rate and review, which is really the key part of it. Make sure to be part of our bad movie conversation by following us on social media. Interact with me on social media. I'm on Instagram at Movie Miss, which is movie_miss. The show is on Instagram at Let's Talk Turkeys. Also on Blue Sky at Let's Talk Turkeys and Facebook. We're on X. I'm honestly not sure how much longer I'm going to have the show on there, but currently the handle is at Gobble Podcast. Get it? Gobble, 'cause like a turkey. You can also chat with like-minded bad movie lovers in our Facebook discussion group. And like I mentioned, we're rolling into season 5. It is 2025. The show, it's been a wild ride, still going strong. So if you have a movie that you would like to hear covered on the show, let me know by emailing direct at letstalkturkeys, all one word, at yahoo.com. Also, hit me up on socials if you want to be a guest on the show. Always looking for guests. I can assign you a movie, something we think is fun, or you can bring a movie that you think is a bad movie if it has a low Rotten Tomatoes score, or you just really don't like the movie, but you like to talk about it. That's half the fun, I think. Again, this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it. Without you, the show wouldn't still be kicking around. So thank you so much for hanging in there with us.
I'll be back.
Get the fuck out of here! No, I cannot.
Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Why don't you get the fuck out of here? Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.